Quiet future. Back in town with John and Gear. At the Mass all the faithful bow, as the priest consecrates the host through the mystery of his vow. At this sight John becomes engrossed, thinking of how Jesus is here, the Son of God. His innermost being is awed at being near God, hoping one day he could eat and drink what Margreta holds dear, this holy sacrament. To eat and drink Jesus in union with saints and sinners, the whole fleet of the Church in this communion through birth, life, and death, all await with faith and hope the reunion in heaven. Such a different state of mind and rhythm of life here. Margreta, she is never late to Mass. How could she disappear like this? She only went out to check on the fake bodies out near the town's edge. She should be through by now. Whose hand would he hold for the Lord's Prayer? He scanned every pew for her, but the dark seemed to pour in from the windows. He could not see her. Someone was by the door in the back. But no, she would not stay there. She would join them to pray. Back to Margreta.
You must kill her now on the spot,
Creeple intones.
and let us say her false Lord's Prayer from back to front.
But Margreta begins to pray the Lord's Prayer at Creeple's affront, in full knowledge that at this time the faithful stood facing the front, and with the priest prayed the sublime prayer that, when Jesus was asked, taught to his disciples for all time. At hearing this, Creeple is brought into a hysterical fit of laughter that King Renfrey caught. Then upon Margreta they spit, and mocked the prayer of the one true God. Their mocking jeers did not quit, but with every line of prayer grew. Then with inexplicable grace she sang a sweet song so as to drown the wickedness and displace it with something good that will last her last few moments in this place. A love song for the one who cast her soul as a babe, her just judge, who will recount all of her past, but none of it will he begrudge. She came to love Emmanuel, and from his love she would not budge. O come, Emmanuel, and lead us all to Israel. He came to earth and went to hell. God was killed on this brutal rock. Men killed Christ here under the spell of death. But God is both my rock and refuge, suffering with me, gathering me into his flock. He is just and filled with mercy. Though I suffer, thou, God, art good. Her last words, my Jesus mercy, were as hot coals on those who stood around her, watching as her new life began. Something that they could not grasp. To them they only slew a body without name or face or family. Her soul withdrew from her body from time and space, from the pain and torment endured at the hands of those void of grace. John and Gear now search for M. Fearing Margreta was injured, Gear and John scoured the whole town. No sign of M. So John adjured Gear to search with him for M down the path of their village leading to the other towns. And the frown on John's face seemed to be pleading to Gear. But it was dark out there. Water was no longer beating as dew on the grass. Everywhere, fragile frost swathed all things exposed to the bitterly frigid air. For the warm sunny days reposed. They headed to the library through the pitch shadows that imposed on them, forbidding and scary thoughts of dark things lurking unseen, with snarling jaws and sharp teeth, hungry and slimy, riddled with gangrene. They arrived at M's house before too long. Nowhere. There she was seen, her presence gone. How their hearts tore open in fear. Where could she be? Somehow Gear knew he must restore their composure to think clearly. He gathered himself, deciding to set out to the hill to see if Renfrey's raiders were biding the night within sight. They both set out for a night journey, hiding among the shadows that had met them earlier with piercing fear that neither of them would forget. As towards the hill they drew near, they noticed the sky was glowing orange, and muttering a curse, Gear pauses from the walking, knowing the clouds were colored from the fire of all those fallen leaves blowing in the hot wind of Renfrey's ire. And in this pause a slight cool breeze passes, whispering like a choir in their ears, a song of the trees. The moment passes, and before they carry on, Gere looks and sees an object on the forest floor, out of place in this quiet wood. Instant recognition. The floor drops out from beneath him. Gere could not believe what he saw. M's cross, the crucifix of gold and red rosewood, glowing faint on a bed of moss. The large one from her rosary she wore on her habit. This loss was significant. It meant she was in trouble, taken captive. The color red. All Gere could see. Red. Red was all that Gere could see. Expletive after expletive surged out of his mouth. Helpless. They were helpless. How could Gere now live with her gone? Up the high hill they flew, crashing through branches and dry, crunchy leaves. Reaching the crest, they felt the light grow brighter. This high hill had been protecting them from the awful scene below. Well nigh was their end. John's plan was dumb. On the top now, their senses reeled from the wild sounds emanating from the valley below. Hell was unsealed, every circle marching forward, rising from the depths. They both kneeled, in fear and beseechment. Toward the center, a circle of fire, lined with crosses facing outward. In the center, there was a mire filled with bodies squirming around. Outside of this was Satan's choir, dancing insanely to the sound of souls succumbing to the heat of the crosses circling around them, hemming in the cooking meat. No longer could they watch this scene. The boys walk away in defeat. John's plan could not keep such obscene animals from their town. On down the hill they stumble. They both lean on each other, each with a frown hard set into their face. The dark forest and night sky seemed to drown them in darkness. The only spark of good light was M's crucifix. John gripped as if it were the bark, protecting his soul from these licks. They entered town, dawn approaching, and found themselves within a mix of villages. Renfrey's encroaching legions would burn through them like leaves in a bonfire. Without broaching M's capture by King Renfrey's thieves, Gere casts out some of what they saw in the valley. It deeply grieves all present. Where is God's good law in all of this? Some of them flee to escape the voracious maw of the growing land of Renfrey. Others find that they have to stay for the sick and the elderly. Back to Renfrey, fool.
We will not let this town delay my conquest. Have fool Cromwell draw up a plan to find a way around these cursed towns in the dell succumbing to the melt. I'd burn them if it wouldn't spread that hell that melts the flesh and bone.
With stern faces, Renfrey's men nod.
And where is that fool?
The mood takes a turn at Renfrey's question, asking where Cromwell is. But no one had known, having not seen him anywhere, since sending M to the king's throne. Raising his chin and looking down, he says in a casual tone,
Creeple, you will now serve the crown as High Chancellor. Sir Voltric, you will take 2 men and track down Cromwell, put his head on a stick, and through the camp you will parade it and label him heretic of the king's will. This will persuade many that I do not hold rank above faith in their king.
This made Voltric proud and incites a "Thank you, Lord," as he bows. So these men are cut free to find him who shrank from being a good citizen. Around the camp they found him not, so they ventured around a fen, into a wood where some did spot a figure run toward. In there they found it to be dark and hot, twisted branches and thorns that snare their garb. Voltric finds a small piece of fabric that the king's men wear. They push onward with this new lease on their prey. But Cromwell is gone. He has shaved off King Renfrey's fleece. Now, midway between dusk and dawn, man Voltric and the other 2 halt. Voltric in front, his sword drawn. A guttural growl slowly grew from a dense copse not far away. What it was they hadn't a clue. All Voltric wanted was to slay the deeply growling unknown beast, so they could carry on their way. But they did not know in the least they had come to the spot Crumfell parted to visit the deceased below in the circles of hell. On them the wolf and leopard sprung, in flurry the three men fell. Teeth and claws piercing, armor stung, quickly taking away their flight. Like sacks of grain the men were flung into the pit where the only light comes from the fires that don't consume, but devours those not contrite.